They are ruthless murderers. They are liquor bootleggers at a time when selling alcohol is against the law. They run rackets and number games to extort money from the poor. They pay off government officials and policemen. But there is a paradox to these gangsters. They believe in a strong sense of family. They would rather be dead than be a stool pigeon. Who are these common criminals that have become an integral part of America's history? They are sometimes called the mob, sometimes the family, but they are all a part of a secret society known as the Mafia. This episode, The American Mob. January 1920, Prohibition becomes the law of the land. The manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol is now banned. However, if you can find some, you're allowed to drink it.
Prohibition is the best thing that ever happened to organized crime. It is the reason that organized crime, as we have known it ever since, exists on the national scale.
It was illegal to sell liquor. That didn't stop people from wanting to drink.
And everybody, pilgrim or pagan, is thirsty. All that is needed is a regular supply, kind of like the way milk is delivered, only it requires payoffs, cover of night, guns, and a willingness to kill. But unlike gambling or prostitution, which takes place locally, the importation of liquor will need international coordination and cooperation, and that's what gives rise to a crime syndicate.
It was a boon for the young criminals. What it did to a very large extent was take them out of their neighborhood communities.
The one man who profits most from Prohibition is the American gangster who rose to international celebrity, known as Scarface, Al Brown, or A. Costa. No other mobster's name is more recognizable than Al Capone.
There's never been a gangster like Al Capone. There's never been anybody who combined his political sophistication with his love of publicity, and who also happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Alphonse Capone becomes the king of the Chicago jungle in the Roaring '20s, but his American story starts like millions of others on a boat in New York Harbor.
Those fellows of that age, their parents had come from Europe. They were a much tougher crowd in terms of getting up there. You know, the real American spirit. Al Capone would have done anything to succeed.
At 16, Capone lands a job as a bartender and bouncer for an up-and-coming gangster, Frankie Yale, at the Harvard Inn in Coney Island. Recognizing Capone's potential, Yale becomes a willing mentor to the ambitious young man.
The Harvard Inn was a very bad dive, and that's where Al Capone served his apprenticeship. Frankie Yale, who appreciated someone of his heft, because he was big for his age, always, and very tough, and very smart. And Al Capone very quickly became one of his most trusted men.
At 18, Al Capone is a brash kid who knows he has a bright future in crime, but he still has a lot to learn. One night at the Harvard Inn, he learns a lesson that will stay with him for the rest of his life. The cocky teenager swaggers over to a pretty girl who is sitting with her brother, a small-time hood named Frank Galluccio.
Capone leaned over and said, "Honey, you got a great ass," and I mean that as a compliment. Frank Galluccio pulled out a knife and slashed.
And gave him 2 long scars on the left side of his face. There was a great deal of blood, although the gashes weren't very deep. And that was the basis of his nickname, Scarface, which, by the way, was a nickname that Capone himself detested.
He would put talcum powder on his face to try to hide it. He never let people photograph him on his left side, and loathed the name.
In late 1919, Capone heads for Chicago to begin a career that will change the face of organized crime. Chicago is a young, prosperous, vibrant, and utterly corrupt town. Politicians and businessmen, police and gangsters are all in cahoots. The city itself is divided along ethnic lines, and the neighborhoods are run by gang lords. Big Jim Colosimo heads up a South Side Chicago domain of gambling joints and brothels. He owns the biggest slice of the pie in Chicago's underworld. Colosimo also cuts a figure in Chicago's chic cafe society as the owner of several cafes. Frankie Yale's friend, Johnny Torrio, serves as Colosimo's lieutenant. It's Torrio who takes Capone under his wing, getting him started in the organization.
When Capone arrived in Chicago, he went to work for Johnny Torrio in the organization as a bathhouse attendant in a brothel and later on as a pimp.
Torrio knows people and he knows business. He's primed and ready when his big break comes. While soldiers fight World War I overseas, conservative groups push a new amendment through Congress outlawing the sale of liquor in America. On January 16, 1920, the 18th Amendment Prohibition goes into effect.
The effect of Prohibition was to place large parts of society outside the law, so it made most Americans, ordinary law-abiding Americans, into lawbreakers by the simple fact of taking a drink.
But Colosimo has come to like being a part of legitimate society. He worries that his reputation will suffer if he gets into the prohibition trade.
Big Jim Colosimo, being reluctant to enter into bootlegging, his own gang recognized that Big Jim was a problem, and they retired Big Jim in a hail of bullets. So the opening of Prohibition gave John Torrio his chance to climb to the top and also to get involved in a multi-million-dollar business.
Torrio wins Capone's loyalty by rewarding the young man's hard work, and Capone, in turn, appreciates Torrio's faith in him. The two men complement each other. Torrio's acute criminal mind but cautious nature are supported by the younger man's fierce sense of loyalty and brutal temper. The wild, boozy ride that had started with Prohibition and careened along with outlaw abundance is about to get even wilder. The beer is still flowing, but the gangs have started to shoot at each other again. Torrio recognizes it and gets out, leaving Al Capone the new big boss. The Chicago underworld now answers to one prince of darkness, the 27-year-old Al Capone. And most are surprised that this thug from Brooklyn exudes such grace and style. He's applauded everywhere, from the baseball diamond to the opera house where Chicago's elite rubs shoulders with him. If ever a man in a city were linked together the world over, it's Capone and Chicago.
He got so much press. He was so colorful. In many ways, he was the best-known American everywhere in the world.
You'd never know that Al Capone was a gangster. He looked and talked like a businessman, which he was, except it was against the law.
He clearly, to the public, tried to portray, like a benefactor. You want liquor, I'm providing it. To some extent, some of the things he said were true. If people weren't buying it, he wouldn't be in business. And some of the best people in Chicago were buying it. So he kind of had a good point. To those people, they probably found it hard to believe that he was capable of all these things that they had written about him. But that was his public image. The people who seen him get upset knew that he was very capable.
Capable and willing. When Bugs Moran hijacks a shipment of Capone's booze, Moran learns the hard way the extent of Big Al's rage. On Valentine's Day, 1929, 7 men from Moran's gang await a shipment of hijacked liquor in a North Side garage. But Capone has arranged this delivery himself.
Car pulls up. A couple people in police uniforms go in. It's a raid. When they lined up against the wall, 2 people in civilian clothes came in with machine guns. Opened fire.
Within seconds, the most notorious massacre in Chicago history is over. 6 men are dead. The 7th will die hours later in a Chicago hospital, never revealing his killer.
It hit the pages across America. All the blood and gore. It was so vicious. The idea of these fellows being mowed down in cold blood in a garage.
Details of the massacre stun Chicago and rudely waken them to the savage workings of the underworld. Bugs Moran himself breaks the gangster code when he says to the press, "Only Capone kills like that." Capone's infamy has attracted national attention. President Hoover deplores the violence and calls for action. Federal prohibition agents crack down on Capone's speakeasies and distilleries. The leader is a firebrand named Elliot Ness. His daring raids provide exciting copy for the press. Smashing stills has little effect on Al Capone or his empire. He's proven he can get away with murder. The federal government looks for another approach to bringing down the big fella.
In 1927, the Supreme Court suddenly ruled that illegal as well as legal income was taxable. This had a huge impact on gangsters because it meant that all the money they were making from bootlegging was suddenly taxable, and they were supposed to report it to the federal government. No one was affected more strongly by this Supreme Court ruling than Al Capone, and it gave the government a weapon to use against him. It was very difficult to put together a tax case against Al Capone because he didn't keep any written records. So instead of trying to find out how much income he had, because there seemed to be no way to trace it, even though it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, they put together a case based on his spending habits. What they did was go around and interview various merchants and ask them how much Capone had spent.
He figured he was going to beat the case. As a matter of fact, I think members of the press were all surprised that he was found guilty.
What fails Al in the end is his own defense team. He has two lawyers who don't fight the introduction of evidence that should be inadmissible, who don't protest the statute of limitations, which has run out on all but 4 of the charges. Instead, they rely only on Capone's popularity to defend him. At the time, even Capone doesn't realize the gravity of the situation.
Until then, no one had gotten more than 5 years. Capone got a total of 11 years.
The prison sentence signals the end of Capone's life of crime and catapults another gangster into the national spotlight. Only Charles Luciano is hoping he has a little more luck.
We'll be right back with Rogues Gallery.
Charles Lucky Luciano establishes the National Crime Syndicate in the early 1930s, a malignant but far-reaching underworld force that, to this day, continues to flourish.
Without Lucky Luciano, organized crime as we know it today would not exist.
You look at him and he has just those dead eyes. There's no soul in Lucky Luciano at all.
I think he was a psychopathic killer.
Fear and the ruthlessness that it took to induce fear was the basis of Lucky Luciano's power.
He was a leader. Those things that make men defer to another man, he had them.
Lucky Luciano was probably the most prominent godfather in organized crime in the United States.
I think it's all summed up in a name, though. They didn't call him Lucky for nothing.
Luck has nothing to do with Luciano's choice of career. It is more a byproduct of his environment.
When Lucky Luciano would have been a young boy growing up in New York City, you would have seen that the term melting pot was a great big lie. It was no melting pot. It was isolated enclaves. Lucky grew up in a small Italian enclave which rested on the edge of a huge Jewish ghetto made up of 1.5 people.
People living in fire traps, 10, 15 people to a room. Lucky if they had a coal stove in the middle of a room to keep them warm, eating out of garbage cans. It was a terrible, terrible existence, which is one of the reasons why so many of these people drifted into some kind of life of crime in order to survive.
There are several levels of criminal gangs in New York at this time. Charlie starts out probably in just a street gang of other kids, teenagers, young hoodlums. They're not career criminals because they don't have careers yet. They're out of school, in the streets, doing various small-time things. So the kind of rackets that Charlie got into as a teenager in New York in the 19-teens, they were small-time local stuff, burglaries, larcenies, stick-ups.
He is on his way to a life of seemingly easy money, but clearly at this point Lucky is no more than a street punk.
One of the keys to Lucky's ultimate climb up the ladder of organized crime is that he's in touch with non-Italians. Most of the Italian gangsters of his time just stayed among Italian groups.
But he grew up in an area largely surrounded by Jewish immigrants. I think that that is what contributed to the fact that he had an affinity for and a friendship with other Jewish young men. And that's how Meyer Lansky and Ben Siegel became two of his closest associates for the rest of their lives.
And the story that both of them later told was how one day in the street, Lansky on his own was met by a crowd of Italian boys headed by this tough Charles Luciano. And Lansky told them to get lost. And from this show of defiance, a friendship developed, which really became the most significant alliance in crime in New York in the 1920s and 30s, between Lansky the Jew and Luciano the Italian.
They discover that their talents complement each other perfectly, like a marriage.
The issue of the marriage was the three M's: moxie, muscle, and money. In the future, the Jews would continue to provide the moxie, the Italians would provide the muscle, and they would split the money.
Lansky was the brain. Luciano was the administrator. And Luciano was the man who could take Lansky's conceptions and make them real.
Lansky, because he was Jewish, did not see that as a hindrance to his rise to power. Lansky was very, very powerful and controlled all the finances for the New York mob. Who's the one that really has the power, the guy with the money or the guy with the gun?
It's a very important partnership, and Meyer Lansky becomes absolutely important to Charlie's future dealings as a gangster.
Luciano and Lansky, in the right place at the right time. They are about to become the beneficiaries of the best business opportunity the American government has ever given anyone: Prohibition.
Prohibition was a wonderful opportunity for bright young men like Lansky, Luciano, Siegel, clever business people, and this was really the beginning, the funding in America of the underground economy.
By 1925, when the average American is earning $2 a day, Lucky and Lansky are raking in thousands of dollars a week.
And at that time, the Italian mobsters were beginning to organize. The Maranzano faction and the Masseria faction, and the crime families were starting to develop.
So almost all the Italian gangsters in the greater New York area ended up in two groups. You're either with Masseria or Maranzano. Maranzano and Masseria were old world figures, still believed very much in the ways of the mafia in Italy.
The old world ways and the gang war between Masseria and Maranzano are bad for business. If mob profits and power are to increase, the rivalry must end. So Luciano embarks on a risky course of action.
Masseria had no idea anything was going to happen to him. The story is that Charlie Lucky made a date with Joe in Coney Island in a restaurant there, late.
So that by the time they finished eating, most of the diners would have left the restaurant. And so, we're finished eating, how about a little game of cards while we have an after-dinner drink? And they started playing cards.
And at a certain point, Luciano gets up and goes to the washroom. And just at that point, remarkably enough, in comes some killers and they kill Joe the Boss Masseria. Luciano is cool. I mean, he is cool. He doesn't flee the scene. He sticks around. The cops arrive, and Charlie Lucky is there to explain what happened. And he says, well, I don't know. I didn't see it. I was in the washroom when the shooters came in, and I'm very sorry that Joe the Boss is dead. Well, Charlie's the young upstart now. He has taken over the Masseria gang, and the main rival is the Maranzano gang. Salvatore Maranzano is an older man, a man of some culture and depth, and sees himself as the successor to Julius Caesar among great Italian leaders.
And Luciano came to the conclusion, my God, we got rid of one despot, only to have him succeeded by another. This won't go.
Well aware of what Lucky has done to Joe the Boss, Maranzano surrounds himself with formidable protection. But killing this self-styled successor to Julius Caesar will not be easy. His bodyguards know all of Lucky's men by sight, so Luciano asked for help to pull off one of gangland's greatest hits.
Luciano came up with a great idea. I turned to my friend Meyer Lansky, and I'm going to ask him to handle the hit of Maranzano.
September 11th, 1931. A group of U.S. Treasury agents arrive at Maranzano's offices near Grand Central Station and demand to inspect his financial records. Expecting hostile Italians, the guards feel they have nothing to fear from these men and usher them into the boss's inner sanctum. The phony T-men whip out guns and blow Maranzano to bits. Legend has it that Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, as a personal favor to their friend Lucky, are among those pulling the trigger. The man left standing is Lucky Luciano, who now finds himself in the remarkable position of being one of the most powerful gangsters in America. His vision has carried him to the top of the heap, and in unprecedented fashion, he has consolidated the power of the underworld.
What Luciano saw was that if you have power within your own territory, and you don't have to worry about somebody coming in and fighting you all the time for that power, and you don't go into somebody else's territory and fight him for his power, you're both going to succeed.
What he did then, he took the 5 families in the New York area, and he said we should keep in touch with and cooperate with the boys in Cleveland, the boys in Chicago, Capone's group, and Detroit, and so on. And we should put this group all together. And from among the leadership of that group, we will have a national commission.
It will give the Mafia a national scope and unity and cohesion that it hasn't had before, really that no underworld gang has ever had in this country.
It turned out to be a remarkably successful enterprise because within a decade or so, the Mafia families in the United States were making more money than the 10 major industrial corporations combined.
Lansky and Luciano operated in a cash economy. They always had a great deal of money in their pockets. That was how they operated. It was very easy for them to become big tippers and to get very fond of living high on the hog and the flash lifestyle.
Lucky loved the spotlight. He loved to get dressed up in a tuxedo and make the rounds of the clubs, all the places where gangsters went. He's always involved in that sort of life. He likes being out in the world and being acknowledged as the great Lucky Luciano. He's rather too prominent. It brings him to the attention of Tom Dewey later on.
For 20 years, the underworld has preyed on our people and robbed them, and then frightened them into silence. But now, the day of fear of the gangster is coming to an end.
Tom Dewey is an ambitious young prosecutor who came to New York in the 1920s from a small town in the Midwest. He is appalled by the corruption in the big city. This outrage fuels his work as a crusading racket buster.
Dewey always wanted to get the big boss, and everybody knew who the big boss was. It's Lucky Luciano. But the actual effort to prosecute him is a matter of circumstances and indirection.
The case against Lucky Luciano is designed to prove that he is the power behind prostitution in New York City. As most of the 66 witnesses called are in the racket themselves, Dewey agrees not to press charges in exchange for their testimony against Lucky. Even though these women have no idea who their real boss is, they implicate Luciano, and Dewey is brilliant in the courtroom.
He really knew his way around a courtroom. He used his voice beautifully. He lost his temper only if it seemed effective to do so. And he persuaded the jury that Luciano was the guy.
In June 1936, after less than 24 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Lucky Luciano guilty. Luciano spends the next 6 years in jail at Dannemora Prison, known as Siberia in the underworld because of its location in northern New York State. With Lucky behind bars, control of the New York mob's future rests squarely on the shoulders of Meyer Lansky.
Rogues Gallery will continue in a moment.
When Lucky Luciano goes to jail in 1936, the helm of the New York underworld shifts to Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky.
So in those ways, there is continuity. Lansky, in his own person, provides the continuity for the leadership of that family because he is always the Jewish expert at the right hand of the mafia boss.
There was a sense in which Lansky got on better with Costello than he did with Luciano. Costello was much more a Lansky man. Pretensions to civility, to even some sort of intellectual attainment, not as flashy and vulgar as Luciano.
They have the reputation of being thinkers. I mean, Lansky is almost an intellectual among gangsters because he belongs to the Book of the Month Club and is occasionally seen with a book in his hand. This is unheard of for a gangster.
So in the Costello organization, you had Anastasia on the one hand, who represented the muscle, and Lansky on the other.
But Meyer believes he and Bugsy could be next on Dewey's list, so the two friends lower their New York profiles.
It was his partner, Ben Siegel, who had gone west to California, that Lansky encouraged. Take a look at Nevada. You can have legal gambling casinos. And Ben went there. And Meyer helped him get Frank Costello and other investors to put money into something new.
Lansky further entrenches himself in Florida, where he likes the warm tropical nights and the vibrant atmosphere. And just 50 miles across the water from the lights of Miami Beach is another interesting opportunity. Havana, Cuba is a favorite winter resort for wealthy Americans, and Lansky makes a few small casino investments there. Like Nevada, gambling is legal in Cuba, but that doesn't mean payoffs don't have to be made. As usual, Meyer makes it his business to know whom he needs to know. One of the friendships he makes is that of a rising young army officer named Fulgencio Batista. By happy chance, Lansky's old friend Batista seizes power in Cuba. But Batista has a severe public relations problem. Prominent Americans gambling at Havana casinos have been cheated in crooked games. Cuba's lucrative vacation industry is in jeopardy. Batista knows Lansky's reputation for running an honest house and invites him to supervise all the casinos in Havana.
So as a result, the tourists were protected because all the gambling places in Cuba, thanks to Meyer's intervention, were honorable and honest.
Lansky found himself on a Caribbean island just at the beginning of the whole Caribbean tourist boom, operating his business as a legal business. Gambling was attractive and open, and there he was, the friend of the president of the country.
Cuba in 1955 is an ideal situation for Lansky. Legalized gambling, a totally corrupt government, and outside the reach of the U.S. Department of Justice. Meyer acts as the broker between the mob and the corrupt Cuban government. Havana becomes his personal fiefdom, the first and only time the mob allows him any real control over anything.
But it was at this very moment of triumph that he made his greatest mistake, as it turned out, because he decided to take all his money. He decided to build himself a hotel, the best hotel in Havana, and he brought the best architects, and he built the Riviera, a wonderful hotel that is still there to be seen in Havana to this day. The first hotel in Havana to have central air conditioning.
Lansky has gone and done the one thing he has always avoided. He gambles with his own money, all of his money.
This was almost contradictory to his philosophy. What I mean by that is, he used to say to me, Vince, never gamble. And he did gamble, see, his whole future there on the Riviera.
But for someone who had always been able to see around corners, he somehow misses the significance of this fellow up in the hills, Fidel Castro. For years, Castro had been leading guerrilla raids against Batista's army, and finally, on New Year's Eve in 1958, he leads an attack on all of Cuba's major cities. The Riviera has been open for exactly 1 year.
But he always retained this confidence that whatever happened, he could buy his way out of trouble.
So Meyer is not alarmed when he wakes up one morning to discover his friend Batista has fled the country. He feels safe with his knowledge of human nature. It doesn't matter who is in power. Everyone is corruptible. He has never been wrong about that. Until now.
His main thrust was pay, pay, pay. He figured money was the answer to everything. By paying, you could quiet any disturbance, eradicate any trouble, get any nuisance out of the way, just pay.
Castro saw the problem precisely as a symbol almost of American corruption, the corrupt influence of America in Cuba. Symbolically, it pointed up the worst aspects of American control over Cuba, and that's why for him it was very important immediately to throw the whole thing out.
Lansky attempts to hang on, pouring what remaining capital he has into the Riviera to keep it open. But 1 year after he took over, Castro declares gambling illegal and closes all the casinos.
Lansky had to leave practically all his assets in Cuba. So when people wonder what happened to Meyer Lansky's money, I say, well, you can go and see it if you like. It's standing there in Havana in bricks and mortar in this wonderful hotel, the Riviera, into which he sunk all his dreams.
It is Meyer Lansky's closest friend, Ben Siegel, who helps organize the West Coast Syndicate in Los Angeles and builds a gambling mecca in Las Vegas.
We'll be right back with Rogues Gallery.
The population in Los Angeles jumps from 1 million to 3 million in the decade following World War II. After long years of deprivation during the Depression, followed immediately by the horrors and hardships of the war, Americans want recreation. They want some place where they can forget the weariness and have some fun. To Siegel, Las Vegas provides the perfect answer.
Las Vegas was a desert town, and it was filled with a lot of cowboys, ranchers, people like that. But there was a lot of gambling in Las Vegas at the time. It wasn't this undiscovered wasteland that people always insist that it was when Benny Siegel found it. He had bought into a couple of the gambling operations down there and was making a lot of money from them. And as more and more people started finding Las Vegas as a way to go over the border, from California and gamble, he thought, wait, this is a great opportunity here. So what he did, he envisioned this really big, massive, glitzy, glamorous hotel to draw, as he put it, the suckers from the big cities to come down to Vegas and lose their shirts.
Unlike the traditional Western cowtown approach that prevails in Reno and other Nevada casinos, this will be a gambling palace of class and refinement where men dress in black tie and women flaunt beautiful gowns and expensive jewelry.
He wanted to call the hotel Ben Siegel's Flamingo Hotel. And again, in gangster circles, as they say, it don't pay to advertise. You don't want to put a gangster's name on the marquee. So it was just called the Flamingo, but it was named after Virginia Hill. She was his mistress.
Obsessed with his idea, flamboyantly taking on the role of hotel entrepreneur, Siegel moves ahead. Though he has no experience in this area, he has unbridled enthusiasm. Travel is a major drawback to the whole idea, but he shrewdly foresees the growing field of transportation. He paints a persuasive picture when he enlists the financial backing of his old pal Meyer Lansky and boss Lucky Luciano. He also encourages Hollywood friends to invest. The hotel's initial price tag is a staggering $1 million.
It was a gamble on his part, and of course the mob money got in there, and they were worried about their money, they didn't know whether this guy's a flake or not, or whether he's really got something going.
He hires developer Del Webb, a well-known contractor who will one day build the first retirement community, Sun City, in Arizona. An excited Siegel spends more and more time in the desert resort, often flying in to meet with Webb and personally oversee the construction. By the end of 1945, Siegel stays almost exclusively in Las Vegas. He wants to open the Flamingo the following year, and he's under a great deal of pressure from his creditors, Meyer, Lansky, and Lucky Luciano. The building drags on slowly, yet Siegel loses none of his initial enthusiasm.
There was a tremendous shortage of everything. To build anything was complicated, particularly way out there. And people were bidding for steel and wood, whatever. So he had to bid higher, and then he had to pay to have the stuff carted out.
The main challenge of building the Flamingo was Benny Siegel, who couldn't make up his mind about anything. He'd see it one way, then it'd be better this way, and then he'd see this wall, and it should be moved here. And poor Del Webb had to keep changing all the plans constantly.
And the expenses kept going up and up and up and up, far beyond anybody's estimate. And the opening was delayed and delayed and delayed.
With his nerves on edge, some suggest the constant alterations reveal a growing instability. Others think that Siegel's too shrewd a businessman to put his hotel in jeopardy. Some speculate he may be skimming. The hotel's final price tag has soared to $6 million. Siegel needs to get the gambling started.
When they finally got to opening at night, it rained cats and dogs. Half the place wasn't lit, the silverware wasn't there, the glasses weren't ready, and it was just a mess.
2 plane loads of stars came in, from the top to the bottom. I mean, Lana Turner, Joan Croft, all of them. So we were jammed. It was fantastic. The opening was sensational. Stars and lights and glamour and, oh boy, beads and furs and jewelry. It was unbelievable. We did the show the next night. The stars were still there. They left, and we worked to 9 people after that. None of the locals would come. It was something they'd never seen before. They were used to cowboy stuff.
The casino's gambling losses this first week are staggering. Siegel does all in his power to pick up the action, all to no avail.
Now, the worst thing you can do if you're part of organized crime is not show profit. Losses are unacceptable. A meeting of the commission was called, among other things, to call Benjamin Siegel to task. The only one who spoke up for Bugsy was Meyer Lansky, who was his old friend, and even Meyer had a few complaints about Bugsy's behavior and the lack of progress at the Flamingo, and why were things taking so long, and why was everything costing so much money. A decision was made that Bugsy had to go. The Flamingo was just not forgivable.
At precisely 10:45 p.m. on June 20th, 1947, a gunman carefully sets his sights on an unsuspecting figure sitting in the living room of an exclusive Beverly Hills home. 9 shots ring out. Minutes later, 41-year-old Benjamin Bugsy Siegel lies in a pool of blood. The man who many will call the father of Las Vegas is dead. By the time of Bugsy's death in 1947, Sam Giancana is the rising star among Chicago's criminal elite, and soon will be crowned the American mob's new boss of bosses.
Rogues Gallery will continue in a moment.
Sam Giancana was one of the most powerful mob bosses in the 20th century. He was also the most scrutinized gangster in FBI history. Both FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and Attorney General Robert Kennedy became obsessed with netting the Chicago mobster. They used every trick in the book, including illegal wiretaps, bugs, and 24-hour surveillance.
Sam Giancana took the majority of the surveillance pressure, no doubt. But from the microphones, they quickly learned that he was actually the day-to-day operating boss, and he became the #1 target.
Giancana has brought some of this unwanted attention on himself. His high-profile lifestyle invites publicity.
Sam Giancana was a playboy, and he's the first playboy gangster that we ever had. It's well known that his girlfriend was Phyllis McGuire, or the Singing McGuires.
Sam has a lot of Hollywood stars who are close friends. One is Frank Sinatra. An often repeated yet never proven tale might explain this. It's said that bandleader Tommy Dorsey forced 20-year-old Sinatra to sign over 35% of his lifetime earnings in order to get his big break. When Sinatra wanted to leave the band a year later, Dorsey refused to nullify the contract.
The big rumor in Chicago to this day is that Sam Giancana is the guy that got him out of the Dorsey contract. That's what everybody believes, is that it was Sam Giancana that made the necessary arrangements.
Among the many stars that Sinatra introduces to Giancana are Marilyn Monroe and Peter Lawford, the brother-in-law of Senator John Kennedy, as well as Sinatra's friends in the Rat Pack.
Well, the Rat Pack loved gangsters. They were part of the Las Vegas gangster crowd. They loved to party with them. They loved the babes. They loved the whole scene. And so the more the merrier, and Giancana was certainly part of that.
How do you feel about all this?
Would you turn around and let us have that smile this direction?
You look pretty good, like you lost a little weight. You've been playing a lot of golf?
The mob of Chicago did not do that type of thing. They were not a flamboyant Hollywood boutique mob. They took care of business, as he was flaunting his power and flaunting his fame and notoriety and bringing a lot of heat on the mob.
Hoover continues to stalk Giancana, but the man about to become Hoover's boss will put on even more pressure. Robert Kennedy, the new Attorney General under his brother JFK, will soon become Giancana's sworn enemy. Many speculate that going up against Sam Giancana may have proved a fatal mistake for the Kennedys. The connection between Giancana and the Kennedys begins many years earlier, when both Joseph Kennedy and Giancana are in the bootlegging business. Though they don't know each other, they share a common interest: getting ahead. As Sam rises to power in the 40s and 50s, Joe Kennedy's sons, John and Robert, begin making their foray into national politics. Giancana's first contact with Bobby sets up an ominous tone. They clash when Robert Kennedy joins the McClellan Commission in 1957 as its chief counsel.
We are looking into gangster infiltration into labor and management. We will be concentrating on that in this coming year, and here in Miami we're looking into it.
Labor racketeering has always been a source of both tremendous wealth and power to the mob. They only have to target several top men in the union to gain control.
And if the individual didn't go along with it, they were going to shoot him in the back of the head, or kill his family, or burn his house.
When Giancana appears at the McClellan hearings on June 8, 1959, he carefully invokes the Fifth Amendment 36 times.
Because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate.
Will you tell us anything about any of your operations, or you just giggle every time I ask you a question?
Decline to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana. Huh?
Anything further?
You tell us anything about your operations?
Decline to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
Though Giancana hides his anger, he never forgets the insults that Kennedy slings at him during the hearing. In the aftermath of Robert Kennedy's assault on Sam Giancana, many have questioned the possibility of the mob's involvement in the deaths of President John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. One theory contends that the outfit believed if JFK was no longer president, Lyndon Johnson would quickly remove Bobby Kennedy from power. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated. The suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, is a man with a troubled past. The next morning, as Oswald is being moved to a different jail, a gunman springs from the crowd and shoots Oswald point blank in the stomach, despite heavy security at the scene. Jack Ruby, who shot and forever silenced Kennedy's alleged assassin, has rumored ties to the mob.
Jack Ruby, as a nightclub owner, might have had some tenuous links to organized crime in Dallas, but I think it's a long way from here to there. Mobsters don't hit politicians by and large, unless they get severely double-crossed by these people, just as they don't hit police officers for doing their job.
I've never seen credible evidence that the mob had the will to get rid of a national leader like that. They knew that if you did something like that, you were basically signing your death warrant.
When Bobby Kennedy got close to returning to power on a presidential level, he too was killed. The case has been made that the mob was afraid to see Bobby back at the helm, where he might once again turn up the heat on them.
Well, you can suggest whatever you want to, but if there's no hard evidence, then it's just idle speculation.
Whatever the truth, why does Sam Giancana continue to fascinate people more than 2 decades after his violent death?
Basically, I think it's an outgrowth of the fact that he's rubbing shoulders with the famous, that he did know a lot of famous people, and he was indirectly connected to some of them, like the Kennedys, by sharing a mistress, Judith Campbell, with John F. Kennedy, that he knew the Rat Pack in Hollywood. He was in the public eye, and therefore, given the number of interesting events that occurred during that period, including elections, assassinations, suicides, things of that nature, and the American fascination with the mob. My theory was always that Giancana wanted everybody to believe that he did all these things. That he got John F. Kennedy elected, that he got John F. Kennedy killed, that he killed Marilyn Monroe, that he dated Marilyn Monroe. I think he loved all of the speculation that he was all-powerful and could do all of these things. I think he basked in that.
Sam Giancana's ruthlessness, his violent temper, the fear he instilled gave him the power to enforce discipline and create an organization whose power allegedly reached to the very doors of the White House. The Mafia is criminal to the core and continues to target the gullible and the innocent, murdering its way through the ages to preserve a secret criminal society that has unfortunately become part of the American myth.